My name is Zion, a 30-year-old software engineer who spent 5 years saving for my dream condo in Boston. I never imagined my own sister would decide my spare bedroom was rightfully hers. When Melanie used my parents' spare key to move in while I was on a business trip, I was devastated. What hurt most wasn't just the invasion, it was the entitled assumption that my hard-earned space wasn't really mine. The day ended with police sirens and her tearful arrest. Before I dive into this painful story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if family boundary stories resonate with you. I grew up in a modest, split-level home in Framingham, Massachusetts, about 20 miles west of Boston. Our family was solidly middle class. My father worked as an accountant while my mother taught elementary school. We weren't rich by any means, but my parents ensured we never went without necessities. I have fond memories of backyard barbecues, summer camping trips in New Hampshire, and holiday gatherings filled with laughter. My childhood wasn't perfect, but it was stable, something I grew to appreciate more as I witnessed my sister's turbulent journey through adulthood. From an early age, I was the responsible one. While other kids spent weekends playing video games, I mowed lawns, shoveled driveways in winter, and eventually worked after-school shifts at the local grocery store. My parents instilled a strong work ethic in me, emphasizing that independence was something to strive for. I took those lessons to heart, squirreling away birthday money and paychecks, while my classmates spent their earnings on the latest sneakers or concert tickets. College was always part of my plan, but I knew my parents couldn't foot the entire bill. I applied for every scholarship possible, and still ended up taking loans, but significantly less than most of my peers. I attended a state university majoring in computer science, a field that fascinated me since I built my first computer at 13. Those 4 years were grueling. While friends partied, I juggled full-time studies with a 20-hour-per-week job at the campus IT department, plus freelance coding gigs on weekends. The sleepless nights and ramen dinners were challenging, but I graduated with a solid GPA and minimal debt. My first job out of college wasn't glamorous. A junior developer position at a struggling startup where the pay barely covered rent for my tiny apartment, shared with 2 roommates. The company folded after 18 months, but the experience taught me invaluable lessons about resilience and adaptation. My second position at a mid-sized financial software company came with better compensation and stability. I lived frugally, bringing lunch from home, driving an aging Honda Civic, and saying no to expensive outings. Every spare dollar went straight into my savings account, earmarked future home. After 3 promotions and switching to a larger tech company with better benefits, I finally reached the point where homeownership seemed attainable. Boston's real estate market was brutal, sky high. Prices, bidding wars, and properties vanishing within hours of listing. For 6 months, I spent weekends touring condos, submitting offers, and facing disappointment. Just when frustration nearly overwhelmed me, I founded a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom condo in a renovated brownstone in Cambridge. The second bedroom was slightly smaller than the master, but perfect for my home office setup and occasional guests. The building had charm, updated amenities, and proximity to public transportation for my commute. The day I signed those closing papers remains one of the proudest moments of my life. At 29, I had achieved something substantial, entirely through my own efforts. No parental down payment assistance, no inheritance, no shortcuts, just years of disciplined saving and career advancement. Those first nights in my very own space felt surreal. I'd walk from room to room, marveling that everything from the hardwood floors to the quartz countertops belonged to me. My sister Melanie's path couldn't have been more different from mine. 3 years younger, she always had a knack for finding the easiest route through life. Where I worked summers, she convinced our parents she needed the break to recharge. While I studied, she partied. Her grades were just good enough to avoid serious consequences, her charm just effective enough to wiggle out of trouble. Our parents, especially Mom, seemed to have different standards for us. "That's just how Melanie is," became a familiar refrain whenever I questioned the double standard. Despite our differences, we maintained a decent relationship growing up. We shared inside jokes, defended each other against neighborhood bullies, and enjoyed many of the same movies and music. The real divergence began after high school. While I headed straight to university with clear goals, Melanie attended community college, sporadically switching majors 3 times before dropping out altogether. She cycled through retail jobs, bartending gigs, and administrative positions, never staying more than a year. Her financial decisions were equally chaotic: maxed-out credit cards, a leased luxury car she couldn't afford, and shopping sprees when rent was due. Our parents continued enabling this behavior well into her 20s. They paid her security deposits, covered bounced checks, and offered their home as a safety net during her frequent transitional periods. I expressed concern privately to our parents, suggesting they might be hindering her growth by repeatedly rescuing her from consequences. These conversations invariably ended with them defending their approach and implying I lacked compassion. "Family takes care of family," Dad would say with finality, ending any further discussion. The situation that ultimately led to our dramatic confrontation began about 8 months after I purchased my condo. Melanie, then 27, had been living with her boyfriend Derek in an overpriced apartment downtown. When they broke up after a volatile 2-year relationship, she couldn't afford the rent alone. Predictably, she moved back to our parents' house, describing it as a temporary situation until she figured things out. 2 weeks into this arrangement, my parents invited me for Sunday dinner, a regular tradition I genuinely enjoyed. Throughout the meal, Melanie peppered me with questions about my condo. How big was the spare room? Did I use it every day? How was the closet space? I answered politely, mentioning my home office setup and how the space doubled as accommodation for visiting friends. As we cleared the dishes, Melanie made her first pointed comment. "Seems like a waste for all that space to sit empty most of the time. I mean, what does a single guy need with a second bedroom anyway?" I laughed it off, but something in her tone made me uneasy. That night, as I drove home, her words echoed in my mind, the first subtle warning of the storm that would soon upend my life. The following Sunday dinner at my parents' house took an uncomfortable turn. As we sat around the oak dining table that had hosted family meals for over 20 years, Melanie cleared her throat theatrically. "So I've been thinking about my living situation," she announced, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "Living with Mom and Dad is obviously not ideal long-term." My father nodded sympathetically while my mother reached over to squeeze Melanie's hand. "You know you can stay as long as you need, sweetheart," Mom assured her. Melanie smiled before turning her gaze directly to me. "Actually, I was thinking about Zion's spare bedroom. It would be perfect for me, close to downtown near the boutiques where I'm applying for management positions. And let's be honest, he's just using it as a glorified computer room." The table fell silent. I carefully placed my fork down, trying to maintain composure. "I appreciate the thought, Melanie, but that's not going to work. I need that space for my home office. I work from home at least 2 days a week, and I often have projects that require a dedicated workspace." "You could move your computer desk to the living room," she countered immediately. "Lots of people do that. It's not like you're entertaining guests every night." "That's not the point," I replied, feeling my patience thinning. "It's my home set up the way I need it to be. Plus, I have colleagues and clients on video calls regularly. I need privacy and a professional background." My father cleared his throat. "Zion, it wouldn't hurt to consider it. Family helps family. It would just be until Melanie gets back on her feet." I felt ambushed. "Dad, I love you all, but this isn't about not wanting to help. That condo is my personal space that I worked incredibly hard for. Melanie needs to find her own place just like I did." "Oh, so you're better than me now," Melanie snapped, tears welling in her eyes, tears I'd seen deployed strategically countless times before. "Must be nice to be so successful and selfish." "That's enough," Mom interjected, though her stern look was directed at me rather than Melanie. "Nobody's making any decisions tonight. Let's just enjoy dinner." The remainder of the evening was tense conversation, stilted. As I prepared to leave, my mother pulled me aside. "Would it really be so terrible to help your sister? That apartment means more to her future than it does to your comfort." Her words stung. My own mother couldn't see that this wasn't about comfort, it was about boundaries and respect for the life I'd built. "I love you, Mom. I'll call tomorrow," was all I could manage before driving home in frustrated silence. Over the next 3 weeks, Melanie's hints transformed into outright requests. Text messages arrived daily. "Found the perfect bed frame for when I move in," or "which closet would be mine?" Each time I responded firmly but politely that living together wasn't an option. Each time she acted as if my refusal was merely a negotiating position rather than a final answer. The situation escalated on a Tuesday evening when I returned from work to find Melanie sitting on my couch scrolling through her phone as if she lived there. I froze in the doorway, keys still in hand. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, heart racing. She looked up casually. "Mom and Dad had your spare key. I wanted to measure the bedroom for my furniture." She gestured toward a measuring tape on the coffee table beside a notebook with scribbled dimensions. "You can't just enter my home without permission," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "That key is for emergencies only." Melanie rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. We're family. Besides, I brought dinner." She pointed to paper bags on the kitchen counter, emblazoned with my favorite Thai restaurant's logo, a transparent attempt to soften the violation. That evening, we had a 3-hour conversation about boundaries. I explained in painstaking detail why her behavior was inappropriate, why cohabitation wouldn't work for either of us, and why she needed to focus on building her own independence. She alternated between defensive anger, tearful pleas, and grudging acknowledgement. By the time she left, I thought we'd reached an understanding. The next morning, I called my parents and respectfully requested the return of all spare keys to my condo. My mother sounded hurt, my father disappointed, but I stood firm. That weekend, I installed a smart doorbell camera that sent alerts to my phone whenever someone approached my door. The fact that I felt compelled to take such measures against my own family saddened me deeply, but seemed necessary given recent events. The following weeks brought an onslaught of guilt-tripping. Melanie sent daily texts describing how uncomfortable the pull-out couch in our parents' home office was, how her job search was hampered by the long commute from suburbia, how sharing a bathroom with our father was literally hell. My parents began calling more frequently, casually mentioning how challenging it was. Having Melanie back home, comments clearly designed to make me reconsider my position. The pressure expanded beyond my immediate family. Aunt Susan called to remind me how Melanie had always looked up to her big brother. Cousin Patrick messaged, suggesting I should step up for family. Even my grandmother, during our monthly phone call, mentioned how in her day siblings stuck together through thick and thin. The coordinated guilt campaign was as transparent as it was effective. I began losing sleep. My concentration at work suffered, and anxiety became my constant companion. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get more intrusive, I received a disturbing call from my neighbor Trevor. "Hey man, just wanted to check if you're letting your sister move in. She was showing some people around your place earlier today." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean showing people around?" "Yeah, she had 2 women with her. I heard her talking about splitting utilities 3 ways. I figured maybe you were getting roommates." After thanking Trevor and ending the call, I sat in stunned silence. Melanie had somehow gained access to my condo again and was actually touring potential roommates through my home while I was at work. The violation felt like a physical blow. I immediately texted Melanie, "We need to talk. Now." Her response came an hour later. "About what?" "About you showing strangers through my condo today without my knowledge or permission." 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her reply. Trevor needs to mind his own business. No denial, no apology, just annoyance at being caught. Something inside me hardened as I realized just how little respect she had for me, my home, and my boundaries. That evening, I waited in my living room, a tight knot of anger lodged in my chest. When Melanie finally arrived, she sauntered in with the casual confidence of someone who believed herself immune to consequences. "How did you get in?" I demanded immediately. She shrugged, dropping her purse on my coffee table. "I had another key made before returning Mom and Dad's." The casual admission of her deliberate deception left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice, it emerged with a cold steadiness that surprised even me. "What you did today crosses every reasonable boundary. You made an unauthorized copy of my key. You entered my home without permission. You brought complete strangers into my personal space. You presented my property as available for rent. Each of these actions alone would be a serious violation. Together, they represent a complete disregard for me as a person." Melanie's expression cycled through dismissal, defensiveness, and finally noting my unwavering tone calculation. "You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be," she said, her voice softening. "I'm just trying to find solutions that work for everyone. Think about it, with roommates, your mortgage would practically pay itself." "That's not your decision to make," I replied. "This conversation is over. I'm changing my locks tomorrow, and I want no further discussion about you moving in. If you can't respect these boundaries, we'll need to reconsider our relationship entirely." The threat of actual consequences finally penetrated. Melanie's eyes widened and genuine alarm crossed her face. "You'd cut off your own sister over an apartment. This isn't about the condo. It's about respect, honesty, and boundaries, all of which you've repeatedly violated." Her strategy shifted instantly. Tears filled her eyes as she collapsed onto my sofa. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm just so desperate. Living with Mom and Dad is killing me. I feel like such a failure watching you succeed while I keep messing up. I thought maybe being closer to you would help me get my life together." Despite my determination to remain firm, the sight of my little sister crying broke something in me. Memories flashed through my mind: teaching her to ride a bike, defending her against neighborhood bullies, helping her with science projects. Had I been too harsh? Was there a compromise I hadn't considered? Before I could formulate a response, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother: "We need to talk about this situation with your sister. Family dinner tomorrow night. Non-negotiable." I showed Melanie the message. She nodded, wiping her tears. "They're really worried about me," she said quietly. "Dad thinks I'm heading for another depression like in college." The mention of her mental health struggles further softened my resolve. While I suspected some manipulation, I couldn't dismiss the genuine issues she'd battled over the years. "Fine," I sighed. "We'll discuss this tomorrow with Mom and Dad, but I'm still changing the locks." The family meeting the following evening was emotional and exhausting. We gathered around my parents' dining table, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. My mother had prepared all my childhood favorites: pot roast mashed potatoes, with the perfect amount of garlic, and homemade apple pie, an obvious attempt to soften the atmosphere. After an uncomfortable dinner where conversation remained superficial, my father finally addressed the elephant in the room. "We need to resolve this situation between you two," he said, looking between Melanie and me. "This family has always stuck together." For nearly 3 hours, we talked in circles. I outlined my boundaries and explained why Melanie's actions were unacceptable. My parents acknowledged my points, but continually circled back to family obligation and Melanie's needs. Melanie alternated between tearful apologies and subtle implications that my success obligated me to help her. Eventually, an exhausted compromise emerged. Melanie would remain at our parents' home and respect my boundaries. I would help her find affordable housing and potentially assist with her first month's rent as a one-time gift. Most importantly, she promised never to enter my home without explicit permission again. "I really am sorry," Melanie said as we concluded the discussion. "I got carried away. It won't happen again." Looking into her eyes, the same hazel eyes that had looked up to me throughout childhood, I wanted desperately to believe her. "I accept your apology," I said. "Let's move forward." As we hugged goodbye, I felt a tentative relief. Perhaps this painful episode would ultimately strengthen our relationship through clearer boundaries and better communication. The next few weeks seemed to validate my optimism. Melanie texted less frequently, and when she did, the messages focused on legitimate apartment listings she'd found or questions about budgeting. We met for coffee twice, conversations remaining light and pleasant. She even apologized again, unprompted, during our second meeting, expressing embarrassment about her behavior. My parents noted the positive change during Sunday dinners. "She's really trying to be more independent," Mom commented. "Your talk seems to have made an impression." One evening, I received an email from my security system provider offering an upgraded package with enhanced features. Given the improved situation with Melanie, I decided the additional expense wasn't necessary and deleted the email, a decision I would soon regret bitterly. As the calendar turned to March, Melanie and I had settled into a comfortable routine of occasional meetups and supportive text exchanges. She'd found a potential apartment within her budget and asked for my opinion. I took her to dinner to celebrate when she passed the initial application process. For the first time in months, our relationship felt like that of normal adult siblings rather than adversaries. When my boss announced I would need to attend an important client meeting in Seattle, a 3-day trip requiring immediate attention, I felt none of the anxiety that would have plagued me during the height of the tension with Melanie. I packed my bags arranged for my neighbor Trevor to collect any packages and headed to the airport with a lightness I hadn't felt in months. Little did I know that my world was about to implode in ways I couldn't have imagined. The client meeting in Seattle started productively. Our team presented new software solutions to a major retail corporation, and their executive team seemed genuinely impressed. During a mid-morning coffee break on the second day, I stepped into the hallway to check my phone messages and found a text from Trevor with an attached photo. "Is this supposed to be happening?" he wrote. The image showed a moving truck parked directly in front of my building. My stomach dropped as I enlarged the photo. There was no mistaking the professional moving company logo emblazoned on the side of the truck. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead as I hurriedly texted back. "Absolutely not. What's happening right now?" Trevor replied immediately. "People carrying furniture in. Thought maybe you were getting new stuff delivered." With trembling fingers, I called my building manager, Marcus. "Hey, this is Zion from Unit 12. Is someone moving furniture into my condo right now?" There was a pause before Marcus answered cautiously. "Yes, your sister arrived this morning. She said you were letting her stay while you're traveling for work. Is there a problem?" The room seemed to spin around me. "Yes, there's a huge problem. I never authorized this. She doesn't have permission to be in my unit, let alone move furniture in. I'm sorry, but she had a key and knew all the building access codes," Marcus explained, sounding genuinely concerned. "She seemed completely legitimate, even mentioned specific details about your unit. Please don't allow any more furniture to be brought in," I instructed, struggling to keep my voice level despite the panic rising in my chest. "I'll handle this immediately." Ending the call, I tried phoning Melanie. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text, "I know what you're doing. Stop immediately." No response. Next, I called my parents. My mother answered with a cheerful, "Hello, sweetie, how's Seattle?" "Mom, is Melanie moving into my condo right now?" I asked, without preamble. A telling pause followed. "Well, honey, you have all that extra space." And she finally found a wonderful opportunity with that boutique downtown. The commute from our house would be impossible. "Mom," I interrupted, "did you know she was moving in today without my permission?" Another pause. "I'm sure you two just had a misunderstanding. You've been so busy lately." I cut her off again. "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is breaking and entering. I never agreed to this." "Don't be so dramatic," my mother chided. "She's your sister, not some criminal. Family helps family." Realizing I would get nowhere with my mother, I ended the call and immediately checked my flight options. The earliest available flight back to Boston departed that evening, arriving after midnight. I booked it without hesitation, then approached my boss with the situation. "Family emergency," I explained tersely. "I need to get back to Boston immediately." To his credit, he took one look at my ashen face and nodded. "Go. We'll wrap things up here." While racing to gather my belongings from the hotel, I logged into my security camera app. The footage confirmed my worst fears, Melanie directing movers carrying furniture boxes and suitcases into my building. She moved with the confident authority of someone who believed they had every right to be there. Even more disturbing, I spotted her boyfriend Derek, the same boyfriend she'd supposedly broken up with months ago, helping coordinate the move. My mind raced through options as I threw clothes haphazardly into my suitcase. Could I call the police? Would they even respond to what they might view as a family dispute? What legal standing did I have when Melanie had a key, albeit an unauthorized copy? Desperate for immediate intervention, I called my friend Anthony, who lived 10 minutes from my building. "I need a massive favor," I explained, outlining the situation. "I'm on my way," he assured me without hesitation. While speeding toward the airport in a rideshare, my phone buzzed with updates from Anthony. "5 people here moving stuff in," he reported. "Your sister, her boyfriend, and 3 others I don't recognize." "What did she say when you confronted her?" I texted back. That you two had an arrangement, and I should mind my business. Her boyfriend suggested I leave before things got uncomfortable. They've changed the electronic door code, too. The violation deepened with each new detail. This wasn't an impulsive action. It was a calculated takeover executed while I was 3,000 miles away. My arrival at the airport brought more complications. My original flight was delayed due to mechanical issues, potentially stranding me in Seattle overnight. After pleading my case to airline staff, I secured the last standby seat on an earlier connection through Chicago, though it meant a 3-hour layover. During that layover, pacing the terminal like a caged animal, I called the non-emergency police line in Cambridge. The officer who answered listened patiently to my situation. "So your sister has a key to your property," he clarified. "An unauthorized copy, yes. I explicitly denied her permission to live there and changed the locks, but she must have made a duplicate before returning the original. And she's your sister, not a stranger." "Yes, but..." "Sir, this sounds like a family dispute rather than a criminal matter. If you're concerned about property damage, you can file a report when you return." Frustration mounted as I realized how the situation appeared from an outsider's perspective. She's actively moving furniture into my home, against my explicit instructions, I emphasized. She's changed access codes and has people I don't know in my private residence touching my possessions. The officer's tone softened slightly. "I understand your concern. We can send someone to check the situation, but without evidence of forced entry or immediate danger, our options are limited. Do you have documentation proving sole ownership?" "Yes, I'm the only name on the deed and mortgage." "That helps. When will you be back in town?" "After midnight if all goes well with connections. Call us when you arrive. We can meet you at the property to help mediate." It wasn't the immediate action I'd hoped for, but at least offered some framework for resolution. Throughout the Chicago layover and subsequent flight to Boston, my mind cycled through scenarios ranging from reasonable confrontation to worst-case outcomes. The emotional devastation cut deeper than the practical concerns. My sister, my own blood, had methodically planned to overtake my home while ensuring I was far away and unable to stop her. Text updates from Anthony continued, each more concerning than the last. Melanie had arranged for utility services to be transferred to her name. She'd introduced herself to neighbors as the new resident. She'd even hung artwork on my walls after removing my own framed photographs. As the plane finally touched down in Boston, shortly after 1 a.m, a hollow feeling settled in my chest. Beyond anger or anxiety lay a profound sadness. The realization that the sister I thought I knew had revealed herself capable of extraordinary betrayal. The bond of trust between us, already strained, now lay utterly shattered among the moving boxes she'd brought into my home. The rideshare from Logan Airport to my Cambridge condo felt interminable. Each red light amplified my mounting anxiety. Outside my building, the moving truck was gone, but lights blazed from every window of my unit at nearly 2 a.m. Anthony waited in his car across the street, emerging as I approached. "It's been wild, man," he said, his expression grim. "They've been going non-stop since this morning. I tried to reason with your sister again about an hour ago, but her boyfriend threatened to handle me if I didn't back off." I nodded, squeezing his shoulder gratefully. "Thanks for being here. I can take it from here." "No way," Anthony insisted. "I'm staying until this is resolved. You don't know what you're walking into." The police cruiser I'd requested pulled up moments later. 2 officers emerged, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a younger woman with a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mr. Harris," the male officer asked, extending his hand. "Officer Brennan, this is Officer Chen. We understand you're having a property dispute." I explained the situation, concisely providing my driver's license and property documents I'd fortunately packed before my trip. Officer Chen reviewed them carefully, while Brennan asked clarifying questions about Melanie's history with the property. "All right," Brennan finally said. "Let's approach this calmly. We'll accompany you inside to assess the situation and facilitate a conversation. Our goal is peaceful resolution." With the officers flanking me and Anthony hanging back, I used my key in the building's main entrance. The elevator ride to the 4th floor was silent tension, thickening with each ascending floor. Outside my unit, I took a deep breath and knocked firmly despite having my own key. This was my home, but something about the situation demanded the formality. After several moments, the door swung open to reveal Derek, 6'2" of tattooed hostility. His eyes narrowed at the sight of the officers. "What's this about?" he demanded, blocking the doorway. Officer Brennan stepped forward. "Sir, we need to speak with everyone inside this residence. Please step aside." Derek hesitated clearly, calculating his options before reluctantly backing into the entryway. The scene that greeted me as I stepped inside my own condo was surreal, like entering an alternate reality where my life had been erased and replaced. My carefully curated furniture had been pushed against walls or relocated entirely. A garish floral couch I didn't recognize dominated the living room. Moving boxes lined every wall, some open with contents spilling out. My home office door stood open, revealing the room had been completely transformed. My desk and computer equipment stacked haphazardly in one corner, replaced by a queen-sized bed with hot pink bedding. And there, in the center of the chaos, stood Melanie wearing pajamas and an expression that fluctuated between defiance and alarm at the sight of police officers. "Zion," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're back early. We were just getting settled." "Settled," I echoed incredulously. "In my home against my explicit instructions." "Our home," she corrected smoothly, glancing toward the officers. "We discussed this arrangement weeks ago. I even have texts about helping with utilities." Officer Chen stepped forward. "Ma'am, Mr. Harris states he never authorized you to move in. Do you have a lease or rental agreement?" Melanie's smile faltered slightly. "We don't need formal paperwork. We're family." "Right, Zion. Tell them how we agreed you'd help me out while I get back on my feet." The audacity of her lie struck me speechless momentarily. When I found my voice, it emerged with a calm steadiness that surprised even me. "I never agreed to this. In fact, I explicitly told you multiple times that you could not move in here. I changed the locks specifically because you made unauthorized entry previously." Derek moved to stand beside Melanie, his posture subtly threatening. "Look, man, it's late. Why don't we discuss this tomorrow, when everyone's had some sleep? Melanie's been through enough without this drama." "This isn't my home to discuss," I replied evenly. "This is my property. You are all here illegally and need to leave immediately." Melanie's demeanor shifted instantly, tears welling in her eyes, her go-to tactic when confronted. "I can't believe you're doing this to me, after everything we've been through as siblings. Where am I supposed to go at 2 in the morning?" "The same place you were living yesterday," I answered. "This was a calculated move you made, knowing I was out of town." Officer Brennan intervened. "Ma'am, I need to see identification from everyone present." He turned to me. "Mr. Harris, do you have documentation proving ownership?" I retrieved the folder containing my deed and mortgage papers, which Officer Chen examined carefully. Meanwhile, 3 other people emerged from different rooms, 2 women, who appeared to be in their mid-20s, and a man slightly older, all looking uncomfortable with the police presence. "These are my roommates," Melanie explained hurriedly. "They've already paid me security deposits." The revelation that she'd collected money under false pretenses added another disturbing layer to the situation. I looked at the strangers now awkwardly hovering near the kitchen. "I'm sorry, but she had no authority to rent rooms here. This is a single-family residence that I own solely." Officer Chen finished reviewing my documentation. "The property is legally registered to Zion Harris alone," she confirmed to her partner. Turning to Melanie, she continued, "Ma'am, without written permission from the owner, you have no legal right to occupy this residence. You and your guests need to gather essential overnight items and vacate the premises." "This is ridiculous," Melanie shouted, her friendly facade crumbling entirely. "He doesn't need all this space. He's just being selfish because he can." "Tell them, Derek. Tell them how Zion always gets everything while I struggle for scraps." Derek stepped forward aggressively. "You heard her. We're not going anywhere tonight. You can't throw people out on the street." Officer Brennan positioned himself between us. "Sir, step back. This isn't a negotiation. The legal owner has denied you permission to be here." "I have rights." Melanie screamed, mascara streaking down her flushed face. "I've established residency, I get mail here. You've been here less than 24 hours, Officer Chen countered calmly. That does not constitute established tenancy under Massachusetts law. What happened next unfolded with shocking speed. Melanie lunged toward my bedroom, shouting that she needed to get proof of our arrangement. Officer Chen followed, while Brennan maintained position between Derek and me. Anthony stepped closer to me, clearly concerned about the escalating tension. Moments later, sounds of a struggle emerged from my bedroom. Officer Chen's voice rose. "Ma'am, put that down. Step away from the safe." I rushed toward my bedroom to find Melanie attempting to pry open my small fireproof safe with a letter opener. Officer Chen had her hand on her holster but hadn't drawn her weapon. "She's trying to steal my financial documents," I explained, surveying the room in horror. Drawers hung open, their contents scattered across the floor. My closet doors gaped wide, clothing pulled from hangers. "I'm not stealing anything," Melanie shouted. "I'm looking for the agreement we made." "An agreement that doesn't exist," I corrected. Officer Chen firmly gripped Melanie's arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with me now and gather only essential overnight items. You are being instructed to vacate the premises." "Get your hands off me," Melanie screamed, wrenching away with such force that she knocked Officer Chen backward into my nightstand. Everything escalated in an instant. Officer Brennan rushed in at the commotion. Derek followed, shoving past Anthony and me in the doorway. When Brennan moved to restrain, Melanie Derek grabbed the officer's shoulder and yanked him backward. "Police, stand down," Brennan shouted, regaining his balance. Instead, Derek assumed a fighting stance. "Nobody's touching her." What followed was chaos. Derek resisted when Brennan attempted to handcuff him, resulting in both men crashing into my dresser. Melanie screamed obscenities while trying to evade Officer Chen. The three strangers who'd been caught in this nightmare gathered in the hallway, wide-eyed and clearly regretting their association with my sister. Officer Chen spoke rapidly into her radio, requesting backup. Within minutes, the cramped space of my bedroom contained 4 police officers. Derek, now handcuffed and still struggling, received a stern warning about assaulting an officer. Melanie continued her tearful protests, even as she too was handcuffed after repeatedly refusing lawful orders to vacate. "You're arresting me," she shrieked incredulously. "I'm the victim here. He's throwing his own sister out on the street." "Ma'am, you're being arrested for trespassing, resisting a police officer, and attempted theft." Officer Chen explained with remarkable composure. "You have the right to remain silent." As the Miranda rights were recited, the surreal nature of the scene washed over me. My own sister being arrested in my bedroom, the sanctuary of my home violated not just by unwanted occupants, but now by the necessary intervention of law enforcement. The situation deteriorated further when my parents arrived, summoned by a hysterical phone call Melanie had apparently made earlier when Anthony first confronted her. They burst into the condo as Melanie and Derek were being escorted out in handcuffs. "What have you done?" my mother cried, rushing toward me with an expression of utter betrayal. "Your own sister." My father's face was thunderous. "You called the police on family. Have you lost your mind, Zion?" "I didn't call them on family," I responded, my voice hoarse with emotion. "I called them on trespassers who broke into my home, changed my locks, and refused to leave when instructed." "She's your sister," my mother repeated, as if this relationship negated all laws of property and personal boundaries. Officer Brennan intervened. "Sir, ma'am, your daughter illegally entered this residence and refused lawful orders to leave. Additionally, her companion assaulted an officer. These are serious offenses." My parents followed the officers out, my mother in tears, my father delivering a parting shot. "This isn't over, Zion. Family doesn't do this to family." Left alone with Anthony and the 3 strangers who'd been unwittingly drawn into this disaster, I surveyed the wreckage of my home. Furniture, displaced possessions, scattered walls damaged from moving large items through narrow doorways. But the physical disarray paled compared to the emotional devastation. "What happens now?" asked one of the women, tentatively clutching an overnight bag. I sighed deeply. "You should contact Melanie about any deposits you paid her. I'm sorry you were misled, but you can't stay here." After they departed, Anthony helped me secure the door with my original keys. "You okay, man?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I wasn't okay. I wasn't anywhere near okay. But as I stood in the wreckage of my violated home, the full impact hadn't yet registered. "I will be," I replied, knowing it would be a long time before those words held any truth. The night after Melanie's arrest ranks among the longest of my life. Despite bone-deep exhaustion from travel and emotional trauma, sleep proved elusive. I wandered through my disrupted home like a ghost cataloging damages and displacements. The physical disorder, furniture shifted, walls, scuffed pictures rehung, felt like a visual manifestation of my shattered sense of security. My phone buzzed relentlessly. My parents alternated between guilt-inducing texts. "How could you do this to your own blood?" and angry voicemails demanding I drop charges immediately. Extended family members, having received a carefully edited version of events from my mother, sent messages expressing disappointment in my cruelty. Only my cousin Ethan, always the family truth-teller, called to ask for my side of the story before forming judgment. Around 4 in the morning, I silenced my phone completely. Sitting in the darkness of my living room, surrounded by the evidence of Melanie's violation, I finally allowed myself to weep, not just for the immediate crisis, but for the family relationships that would never be the same again. Morning arrived with harsh clarity and practical concerns. I called a locksmith who arrived promptly to change every lock and reset all electronic access codes. The building manager, Marcus, expressed shock at the previous night's events and assured me the security footage would be preserved if needed for legal proceedings. I spent 3 hours with a police officer filing a formal report providing timestamps from my security footage showing Melanie's unauthorized entry and the moving company's arrival. When my phone rang displaying the county jail's number, my stomach clenched. Melanie's tear-filled voice came through clearly. "They're setting bail at $2,000. I need you to help me, Zion. Please." The familiar pattern reasserted itself. Melanie creates chaos, then expects rescue. For the first time in our adult relationship, I broke the pattern. "I can't do that, Melanie. Your actions have consequences. You're going to leave your sister in jail." Her voice rose incredulously. "You broke into my home, tried to take it over, refused to leave when instructed by police, and resisted arrest. Those were your choices." Her tone shifted from pleading to bitter accusation. "Mom and Dad were right about you. Success has made you forget where you came from. When did you become so heartless?" I ended the call without responding her words, echoing painfully, despite my certainty that I was finally establishing necessary boundaries. My parents arrived at my door that afternoon, faces drawn from a sleepless night. The conversation that followed was excruciating. My mother vacillated between tearful pleas to help Melanie and recriminations about my selfish nature. My father, typically the more reasonable parent, seemed unable to grasp that Melanie's actions constituted genuine legal violations rather than merely poor judgment. "Do you understand what an arrest record will do to her future?" he demanded, pacing my living room. "Do you understand what she did?" I countered. "She made an unauthorized copy of my key. She moved furniture into my home without permission while I was 3,000 miles away. She brought strangers into my personal space. She collected security deposits under false pretenses. When confronted by police, she refused lawful orders and resisted arrest. These aren't minor indiscretions, Dad. These are serious violations with legal consequences." "She's your sister," my mother repeated for perhaps the dozenth time, as if this relationship nullified all other considerations. "Being my sister doesn't give her the right to take what isn't hers," I replied. "I've supported Melanie emotionally and financially for years. I've forgiven repeated boundary violations, but this crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." They left without resolution, my father's parting words landing like a physical blow. "I never thought I'd be ashamed of you, Zion. Today I am." That evening, Anthony arrived with takeout food and practical support. He helped me rearrange furniture, rehang artwork, and restore some semblance of order to my space. His presence provided a powerful contrast to my family's reaction. Here was someone who understood boundaries and respected mine without question. "You know you're doing the right thing, right?" he asked as we collapsed onto the couch after hours of cleanup. "This isn't about being unforgiving. It's about basic respect for your home and property." His validation meant more than he could know. My family doesn't see it that way. They're too close to the situation, he observed. They've been enabling Melanie for so long they can't see how inappropriate her behavior is. Sometimes the kindest thing is setting firm boundaries even when it hurts. The following day brought practical concerns. I met with a lawyer who specialized in restraining orders outlining Melanie's escalating pattern of boundary violations. He advised documenting everything and proceeding with a temporary order that could be extended if necessary. The process felt extreme when applied to my own sister, but the previous day's events had demonstrated the necessity of legal protection. I took 3 days off work, unable to focus amid the ongoing family drama and practical aftermath. Each day brought new discoveries of Melanie's violations. Mail had been opened, personal documents examined, even my computer showed signs of access attempts. Most disturbingly, I found evidence she had photographed my financial statements and passport, raising immediate concerns about potential identity theft. My lawyer advised a complete security audit. I spent a day changing every password, placing fraud alerts on my credit reports, and securing all financial accounts with additional verification measures. The process was exhausting but necessary given Melanie's demonstrated willingness to cross boundaries. Sleep remained elusive. Nightmares plagued me when exhaustion finally overcame anxiety dreams where I returned home to find strangers living in every room claiming pieces of my life while I stood helplessly in the doorway. I began therapy, recognizing that professional help was necessary to process the profound family trauma unfolding around me. A week after the arrest, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Derek, his voice subdued compared to our last interaction. "Look, man, I'm calling to apologize," he began awkwardly. "I was out of line, way out of line." His unexpected contrition caught me off guard. "Why are you calling me Derek?" "Because I'm taking a plea deal," he explained. "Disorderly conduct instead of assaulting an officer. My lawyer says I got lucky because the officer wasn't injured, but part of my deal is making amends." "And Melanie?" I couldn't help asking. He hesitated. "We're taking some space. Look, she told me you guys had an arrangement. Said you were cool with us moving in temporarily. I wouldn't have gone along with it otherwise." The revelation wasn't surprising, but still stung confirmation that Melanie had deliberately manipulated multiple people in her scheme. "I appreciate the apology," I said finally, "but I need time before considering any form of reconciliation with either of you." My parents continued their campaign of pressure and guilt, though the intensity gradually decreased as days passed. My mother's texts evolved from outright accusation to subtle manipulation. "Melanie's so depressed she's barely eating," or "We're struggling to afford her lawyer." I maintained my position with a simple response: "I'm sorry you're going through this." 2 weeks after the incident, I attended court for the restraining order hearing. Seeing Melanie across the courtroom, pale, disheveled, flanked by a public defender, triggered a complex wave of emotions: anger at her actions, sadness for our fractured relationship, guilt for my role in her current circumstances. When the judge granted a 6-month order prohibiting her from approaching my home or workplace, her expression of betrayed disbelief nearly broke my resolve. The following Sunday, I declined dinner at my parents' home for the first time in years, unwilling to subject myself to further recrimination. Instead, I accepted an invitation from friends for a hiking trip in the White Mountains, 6 hours of physical exertion and natural beauty that provided the first genuine relief I'd felt since the ordeal began. Gradually, painfully, a new normal emerged. I maintained minimal contact with my parents, brief conversations focused on neutral topics. Extended family members either respected my boundaries or found themselves gently but firmly distanced from my life. Friends like Anthony provided the support and understanding my biological family currently couldn't offer. My condo, once a sanctuary, required reclaiming through intentional actions. I rearranged furniture to eliminate the memory of how Melanie had positioned things. I repainted walls, selected new artwork, and eventually replaced the desk in my home office, the previous one, carrying too many associations with the violation. Each change represented a small step toward reclaiming my space as truly mine again. Therapy provided crucial tools for processing the complex grief of family estrangement without surrendering my hard-won boundaries. Family relationships aren't unconditional, my therapist emphasized during one particularly difficult session. Healthy love includes respect for autonomy and property. You haven't abandoned your sister. You've simply required that she respect you as an individual with rights. Those words became a mantra during moments of doubt, a reminder that establishing boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary for authentic relationship. As spring turned to summer, I received notification that Melanie had accepted a plea deal, probation, and community service rather than jail time. The news brought relief rather than vindication. Despite everything, I didn't want her future permanently damaged by a felony record. Yet I remained firm in my conviction that natural consequences were necessary for genuine growth. One warm evening in July, sitting on my balcony watching sunset paint Cambridge in golden light, I realized something had shifted within me. The raw wound of betrayal had begun to scab over, not through forgiveness exactly, but through acceptance. My sister had made choices that revealed fundamental aspects of her character. My parents had demonstrated the limitations of their understanding. These painful truths, once acknowledged, lost some of their power to wound. As I sipped my coffee and watched darkness gradually claim the sky, I understood that the path forward would be neither simple reconciliation nor permanent estrangement, but something more nuanced, a carefully constructed relationship built on new foundations of honesty, boundaries, and consequences. 6 months after that chaotic night, when police escorted my sister from my home, I sat in the same spot where I'd once wept in darkness, now illuminated by morning sunlight streaming through newly hung curtains. The physical space had been reclaimed and transformed. The emotional landscape, too, had shifted in ways both painful and necessary. Therapy provided the framework for my healing journey. Weekly sessions helped me navigate the complex terrain of family estrangement without drowning in guilt. My therapist, Dr. Rebecca Sullivan, specialized in family trauma and boundary issues. Her guidance proved invaluable as I learned to distinguish between genuine familial obligation and the unhealthy expectations that had characterized our dynamics for years. Family relationships aren't static, she explained during one breakthrough session. They evolve as we grow into our authentic selves. Sometimes that evolution requires painful recalibration. The legal consequences of Melanie's actions unfolded with merciful moderation. Her public defender negotiated a plea agreement, resulting in 18 months of probation, 50 hours of community service, and mandatory financial counseling. The charges of resisting arrest were reduced in exchange for her guilty plea to trespassing and attempted theft. While the outcome provided accountability without permanently damaging her future prospects, Melanie viewed it as further evidence of my betrayal rather than a consequence of her actions. My relationship with our parents followed a halting path toward cautious reconciliation. For 2 months following the incident, our communication remained minimal and strained. Their initial stance, unconditional support for Melanie, regardless of her actions, gradually softened as the reality of the situation became impossible to ignore. The turning point came after they attended one of Melanie's court-mandated financial counseling sessions. "We've been thinking about some things my father said during an awkward lunch meeting at a neutral restaurant." The counselor pointed out some patterns we hadn't recognized. My mother nodded, her eyes downcast. "We may have enabled behaviors that weren't helping Melanie become independent." This tentative acknowledgement represented significant progress, though full understanding remained elusive. We established new parameters for our relationship, scheduled visits, rather than spontaneous drop-ins, no discussion of my legal decisions regarding Melanie, and immediate conclusion of any conversation that devolved into guilt. Manipulation. These boundaries, while initially uncomfortable for all of us, ultimately created space for healthier interaction. Melanie herself remained beyond the reach of reconciliation. The restraining order expired without renewal, but I maintained no contact through personal choice, rather than legal mandate. Through family updates, I learned she had moved to Springfield, secured stable employment at a department store, and begun dating someone new. These positive developments brought genuine relief. Despite everything, I wanted her to build a healthy, independent life, just not at my expense. My home underwent deliberate transformation. The spare bedroom that had sparked so much conflict was completely redesigned, no longer just a home office, but a multi-purpose space reflecting my evolving interests. New bookshelves housed my expanding collection of photography books. A comfortable reading chair occupied the corner where Melanie had attempted to place her bed. The walls, once beige, now featured a calming shade of blue that psychologically represented new beginnings. More significant than these physical changes were the new rules governing my space. No family member received keys regardless of relationship. Visits occurred by invitation, only scheduled in advance rather than spontaneous. My building manager implemented a strict protocol requiring my explicit authorization before allowing anyone access to my unit. These measures weren't about paranoia, but about establishing clear boundaries that reflected the sanctity of personal space. The circle of people I considered family expanded beyond blood relations. Anthony, whose unwavering support during the crisis demonstrated true friendship, became a regular presence in my life. My cousin Ethan, who had sought my perspective before judgment, strengthened our connection through regular conversations and visits. Colleagues evolved into friends who shared holiday meals and celebrated milestones. These chosen connections, based on mutual respect rather than obligation, provided a model for what healthy relationships could be. My professional life, temporarily disrupted by the crisis, eventually benefited from the personal growth it catalyzed. The experience of standing firm amid intense pressure translated into greater confidence in business negotiations. The necessity of establishing clear boundaries improved my management style. Even the painful conversations with family developed communication skills, applicable in difficult workplace situations. What had begun as trauma gradually revealed unexpected gifts. Slowly, I reconnected with extended family members who had initially sided with Melanie based on incomplete information. My grandmother, once among my harshest critics, called one autumn evening with a simple message, "I was wrong, Zion." I didn't understand what really happened. These reconciliations occurred organically without pressure or expectation, each representing a small healing of the broader family fabric. Perhaps the most profound transformation occurred in my understanding of home. Before Melanie's violation, my condo represented achievement, tangible proof of professional success and financial discipline. After the crisis, it embodied something more fundamental, the physical manifestation of personal autonomy. Every carefully chosen piece of furniture, every framed photograph, every book on my shelves represented choices that were mine alone. This space, so nearly stolen, had become sacred not for its monetary value but for the boundaries it represented. On the one-year anniversary of the incident, I hosted a small dinner party, something I would have found unimaginable in the immediate aftermath when my home felt irreparably violated. Friends gathered around my dining table, conversation and laughter filling rooms once haunted by conflict. As I served dessert, Anthony raised his glass in an impromptu toast. "To boundaries," he said simply. The words resonated deeply as glasses clinked. The past year had taught me that boundaries weren't selfish barriers but the necessary foundation for authentic connection. By clearly defining what was and wasn't acceptable, I had created the possibility for relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. That night, after guests departed, I stood on my balcony gazing at the Cambridge skyline. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. Family estrangement leaves scars that never fully fade. But alongside that pain existed a profound peace born of self-respect and clear boundaries. I had discovered that saying no to violation opened the possibility of saying yes to genuine connection. The journey from victim to advocate for my own worth hadn't followed a straight line. Some days still brought doubt, moments when familiar guilt resurfaced or memories triggered anger, but increasingly those moments existed alongside a steadfast certainty that I had made necessary choices to protect not just my property, but my fundamental right to determine the conditions of my life. In the quietness of that anniversary night, I recognized that the most important boundary I'd established wasn't the new locks or visitor policies, but the internal clarity about my own worth. The knowledge that being family didn't confer the right to take what wasn't freely given. The understanding that love without respect isn't really love at all. As I prepared for bed that night, I noticed my reflection in the bathroom mirror, the same face, yet somehow fundamentally changed. The eyes that looked back at me belonged to someone who had faced betrayal by those who should have offered protection, and emerged not harder but clearer, not bitter but wiser. someone who understood that forgiveness doesn't require surrender and that compassion isn't synonymous with capitulation. I'd learned that true strength isn't found in avoiding conflict but in facing it with integrity. That family can be both biological and chosen, both inherited and created. That home isn't just where you live but where your boundaries are respected and your autonomy honored. If you've stayed with me through this story, perhaps you've recognized elements of your own family dynamics. The subtle or not-so-subtle pressure to sacrifice your needs for others' wants. The guilt that accompanies establishing necessary boundaries. The painful recognition that those who should support your independence may instead resist it. If so, I hope my experience offers some validation. Your space, physical, emotional, financial, belongs to you alone. Sharing it should always be your choice, never your obligation. Standing firm in that truth isn't selfishness but self-respect. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? How did you navigate the guilt that often accompanies such decisions? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more authentic conversations about family dynamics and personal growth. Remember that your boundaries deserve respect, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to stand firmly in that truth. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage in your own journey toward healthy boundaries and authentic connections.